My lords, today we are going to explore the relationship between two, for lack of a better description, gods. Namely the Toxic God and the Reckoning, also known as the end of the cycle. I am somewhat fancifully calling these events the Shroud War, but make no mistake, these beings are trying to kill one another. Today's report will be structured in the following manner. We will start with some speculation. I will cover the relationship between both entities, including how and why I think the end of the cycle attempts to subvert the Knights away from the Toxic God, why the Toxic God attempts to and is able to defeat the end of the cycle if an empire arms it via Cosmogenesis and the Horizon Lance, and these will tie in with my theory regarding Zeroni Ascension, and that they are now essentially operating as de facto gods but still remain fighting one another. After this speculation, I'll detail a report in full on the Knights of the Toxic God and discuss all that we know about them and their hunt for the Toxic God, finishing off with how they meet it via Cosmogenesis and then slay the end of the cycle with its help. So I'll start the speculative element, but first we need to understand who the Knights of the Toxic God are and what their goal is, so I'll start there. Long ago, their planet was divided. Petty kings squabbled constantly, and their population bled for vain ambition. But with the coming of the first High King, this would all change. The king's inspired leadership forged a kingdom without equal. Above all else, the High King was pious. War was waged against any who would deny their god, but still the heretics persisted. The king's prayers were answered when the Toxic God visited their world. Though its time among them was brief, its baneful influence poisoned the lands of the unbelievers. Any who survived pledged fealty to the High King, and for the first time, their world was unified. The Toxic God soon left, but the king determined to find it again and founded an order of knights. For centuries these valiant souls searched tirelessly, but to no avail. The god had long since departed from their world. The next chapter of their quest would be written in the stars, with the use of powerful relics. It was the knightly order that would realise the civilization's spacefaring ambition. They built a mighty orbitable station that would become the springboard from which they plunged ever deeper into the cosmos. So my lords, here we have a group of knights who worship in their own way this Toxic God. However, early into the Knights' quest, a holy visitor came to their order's headquarters, and this visitor would introduce them to the end of the cycle. It is here that I believe that the end of the cycle first became aware of the Knights' presence. This visitor offered them a simple bargain. I shall detail the histories for you now. A figure in shrouded mystery of a species hitherto unknown to us. He called himself simply Pod and offered us a bargain. In return for a price yet to be named, Pod would send a knight into the shroud, and from within, the knight would glean the knowledge that we sought. The knights chose to listen to this visitor and agreed to send one of their order on this quest into the shroud. With the holy visitor's guidance, the knight entered the unknown. Visions, previously unimaginable, littered across his consciousness before an entity appeared. The Thesaurus of Secrets, the visitor whispered. This being took a form that the knight could only later describe as beauty beyond compare. This being requested the following: give us the scent of the first day of summer, the satisfaction of a challenge overcome, and the warmth of a lover's embrace. Then shall I reveal to thee what thou wishes. The knight, it would appear, decided that this price was too great, and they declined the offer, to which it would seem greatly angered the spirit. It was here that the knight was thrown to the being that we know as the end of the cycle. The record states, the creature spoke. Thou wouldst spurn my help, a blight upon thine house. The knight felt his consciousness being wrenched from his body and set adrift. For what felt like eons, he floated aimlessly through the shroud, unable to control his movements. Finally, he came across another entity. Where the Thesaurus of Secrets had been mystifying yet magnificent, this one was terrifying. It is not yet your time, it boomed. Go home, You are not yet fit for this bargain. And with that, the knight was returned to his body. This meeting, my lords, was the first time the knights came into contact with the end of the cycle, and it would appear that this meeting left an impression upon the end of the cycle, as if the knights ascend psionically and venture into the shroud to pact with an entity, the end of the cycle is 5 times more likely to appear and bargain with them. For something normally so elusive, this feels important. Is this increased chance due to the knights learning of and becoming fascinated by the end of the cycle, or is it because the end of the cycle realizes what these knights are capable of and has indeed been designated for? Perhaps a bit of both, perhaps not. In any case, I feel like this interaction is somewhat of a subversion. The end of the cycle is trying to take the knights away from their original deity, the toxic god, which may or may not be because the end of the cycle knows that the toxic god intends to kill it. Perhaps not, or the end of the cycle would just destroy the Knight Empire in the first place. Perhaps it is of a greater significance if the end of the cycle can convert these knights. In any case, the interaction occurs. It is just the why that eludes us. But furthermore, it also makes me question who was this holy visitor? Why did it appear? And was it prompted to do so by the end of the cycle? Perhaps there is some sort of hidden sect in the galaxy who does the creature's bidding. Some sort of dark brotherhood, perhaps. Food for thought. But this is all rather important, as the Knight's end goal will become clear when they go down the path of cosmogenesis, which, remember, in theory the end of the cycle hopes to prevent via the Reckoning, which would have destroyed them in 50 years, likely well before the Knights would ever be able to achieve cosmogenesis, meet the toxic god, and escape our reality. This point is further reinforced when we find out that the Knights meet a trickster who has been sent from the Shroud and who, according to them, has a master that does not want them to break the balance of the Shroud more than they already have. This trickster states that there is no toxic god, and its mission is to destroy the Knights entirely. Who is this trickster? Were they sent by the end of the cycle? Is this another measure of control, another way that the end of the cycle tries to prevent its own destruction? The next point is also important. Regardless whether the Knights have pacted with the Shroud entity or not, the toxic god will meet them on the other side of the event horizon. They will never meet another Shroud entity, they will always meet the toxic god. But again, somewhat importantly, they do meet the toxic god within the Shroud, despite the toxic god's home not being the Shroud. The record of the Knights meeting the toxic god is clear. I shall read it for you now. After the violence of the crossing, the other side was quiet. An unnatural stillness surrounds us. Our needle is damaged, but no critical components were lost. Between one moment and the next, telemetry reports began to flood in. It is here, the one that we named the toxic god, and the object of our quest. Our knights stand petrified and uncertain, while all around us is draped in the familiar decor of the Shroud. The creature speaks. Mine champions, thy coming here was foretold, and thou hast proven their worth. A million questions flood into our mind, yet a single answer comes in reply. We were to craft its weapon, the Horizon Needle, and now we will fight alongside it. We're going to embark on a journey across dimensions, a crusade against the horrors of the multiverse. The Shroud is not its home, but harbours the legacy of those that were divine. Something that could bring about the end of our galaxy. Something that needs slaying. It seizes our systems, its power immense. The needle is turned into a Horizon Lance, a weapon sharp enough to pierce the heart of any foe. Our quest has only just begun. Some key takeaways from this record. The Shroud is not its home, but harbours the legacy of those who were divine, something that could bring about the end of our galaxy. This particular line screams to me that we are right about the Zeroni Divine becoming the Shroud Gods, specifically the end of the cycle. We also know that the Knights are successful in slaying said entity, as records suggest that in a post-cosmogenesis galaxy, After this ending, the end of the cycle is uncontactable, as if it simply does not exist. I can only assume that means it's been slain, as the record suggested. It also prompts us to ask the question, what is the toxic god? Perhaps it is the Zeroni, saviour, intent on finishing a fight millions of years old, destroying the divine for good. To round up the theory, I think it's possible that the Zeroni never truly perished. They live on within the Shroud, still at war with one another. The divine became the end of the cycle, and perhaps the other major Shroud entities as well. The saviour potentially became the toxic god, and thus their battle continues. Of course, maybe the toxic god is unrelated to the Zeroni at all, and for whatever reason dislikes the would-be new upstart gods. These entities fight, and they use mortals as their weapons. It may be that we are simply pawns in the game of gods. That, my lords, brings the speculation part of the report to a close. I shall now detail in full the history of the Knights of the Toxic God. We have detailed accounts of their exploration of the galaxy and their eventual meeting with the Toxic God. Chapter 1. We start with the tale of Knight Germadine. The Knight Commander was stern and severe. Around him, all of the knights were present, either in the flesh or via holocoms. They stood silently as the commander spoke. Knight Germadine, thy reckless behaviour almost brought death upon 5 of your fellow knights. Thou art of pure heart, and thy goals noble, but transgressions against the Holy Order cannot be overlooked. By my powers I stripped thee of knighthood, and banished thee from the Order. May fate have mercy upon thee. Germadine bowed, deposited the insignia on the Order of the hangar floor, and then turned without a word and climbed aboard a small transport ship. Later chronicles would report that the banished Knight Germadine knew the sentence to be fair, but this did little to ease her grief. When one's whole life has been in service of the Order, to be cut out from it is like losing a limb. As she had done many times before, Germadine flew out of the keep's hangar and into the great beyond, knowing this time there would be no return. Cast out from the Order, she made her way deep into a nebula. On a previous quest, she and her squire had met a sage living on a secluded moon. Great was their knowledge, and greater their powers, for they belonged to a coven of Shroud witches. Germadine was in need of guidance, and hoped to find solace in the sage's advice. Stories tell us that Germadine renounced her weapons and spent months amongst the sage's students. On this moon, the values of the Order mattered little, and while chivalry was respected, it was not an end in itself. Many were the lessons imparted by the sage, but the ambition of Germadine remained unquenchable. The quest called, and she would answer once more. It was late one night when the sage came to visit her. The sage handed back the weapons the knight had abandoned, along with the data crystal and a note that read, "Thy squire is in grave danger. Thou art a knight no more, but the young one's life rests in your hands. Go now, the perilous nebula awaits." This information would lead Germadine to an asteroid field. Anchored to one of the largest rocks was the damsel, an ancient corvette. Next to it, another of the Order's ships betrayed the presence of a knight. Worryingly, its distress beacon was active. Germadine entered cautiously, stepping into the theatre of a brutal fight. Weapon impacts, both ancient and recent, littered the walls, and the fragments of robots were strewn around. A little deeper in, she found the lifeless remains of a Knight of the Order, and a bloody trail beckoned her forward. Deeper within, the banished knight found a body in stasis, a squire's body. Monitors showed that her young squire, Alagran, was wounded but stable. However, when Germadine approached, the ship's security systems whirred into life. A chilling voice echoed, "Step back, marauder. You are not welcome here." "Stay thy weapons, I am no marauder," Germadine responded. She was greeted by the ship's AI, which appeared to be sentient. It spoke, "Let me get a good look at thee. Indeed, please accept my apologies for the confusion. I am known as Sinople." Germadine inquired into how her fellow knight died. The AI responded, "Knight, sayest thou? Wert thou related? If so, accept my condolences and another apology. I thought the intruder to be a marauder. When I asked they leave my ship, they became highly aggressive. Several of my maintenance droids were destroyed trying to stop them. Next, the knight asked about her squire, Halagran. Thy squire made me realize the mistake I'd made. She had been wounded in the fight and lost consciousness soon after. I placed her in this medical stasis so that she may heal. Ever since my crew was abducted by marauders, I have been very lonely here. I hope to enjoy the squire's company for a moment after she healed. I'd been hacked and taken offline as the marauders approached, and once I overcame the hex cast upon me, the security footage showed them capturing my crew after a fierce fight. They have probably taken them into slavery. My databanks indicate that marauders often do that. All of this was long ago. It took ages to repair myself after the hack. Many parts of my memory banks are still locked to me. But tell me, if thou art a knight, what is thy quest? Germadine gave the AI detail regarding her orders hunt for the toxic god. The AI responded, I have multiple records of my encounters with toxic spacefaring entities. Unfortunately, most of my memories are still locked. I can access the index of the records, but not the information itself. If I help thee, I want thee to take me off this ship. I long for contact with other sentient beings. Would you bring me to your lord? Germadine chose to take the AI with her and return to the keep orbiting her homeworld. Her return to the keep was momentous. There, within the Great Hall, Sinopal revealed that they had contact with an entity very similar to the toxic god sought by the Order. However, much of the AI's memory was encrypted and required significant work before they could access it. As for Germadine herself, she not only put her life on the line by coming back, but she also managed to bring back a tangible clue and save her previous squire, Halagran. For this, the Lord Commander took the decision to lift the banishment and dub Germadine a knight once again. Chapter 2: The Tale of Knight Oxygul and Arson. Tales tell of the Knight Oxygul, who left the keep many years ago on a secretive mission never to return. Such was her prowess that many refused to believe she perished, even though her return was long overdue. Among them was her partner, Knight Arson. Long did he search for clues as to her destination, and finally he discovered a dusty parchment hidden in a compartment of their quarters. Though the parchment was faded and crumpled, 2 words had been circled numerous times: the Milvornus cluster. The Knight Commander swiftly approved a quest to pursue this lead. This was no easy feat for Knight Arson to locate the Milvornus cluster. Certainly, it was not on any map known to the Knightly Order. The chronicles tell of how he travelled far and wide until at last he came across the people who recognised the name. Travel for 3 full days rimwards of Biami, and there thou shalt find the Milvornus cluster, they spoke. Little is known about the place, for no traveller has been there in living memory. It is said that the cluster is barren, but if you go there, then good fortune upon thee, for we do not know what you will find. And so Knight Arson set off post-haste. When the knight finally arrived in the Milvornus cluster, he found that it was indeed empty, and for the first time he felt despair. This had been a most promising lead, but now it seemed as if it had all been for naught. Then, as if emerging from a dream, sensors revealed a planet shrouded in darkness. Its orbit entwined with the space betwixt the stars, bestowing upon the name Shadowed Princess. He set a course. Arriving at the Shadowed Princess, Arson found clear signs of the toxic god. Substances alike to those left on the homeworld after the entity's passing were here and present in great quantities. Even better, a light spaceship was discovered, almost intact, save for significant corrosion that compromised its hull. However, his elation would quickly turn to sorrow, as Arson wept as he located a corroded skeleton nearby the craft, all that remained of his late wife, Oxygul. The long stay in the darkness of space had caused the god's poison to react unexpectedly, concentrating to such a degree that it could only be handled with extreme caution. It was clear to Arsene that the toxic god frequented the Morvornus cluster several centuries before it visited his homeworld. With no further clues as to the god's location, Arsene returned home, with samples of the deity's toxin retrieved. These samples greatly advanced the Order's knowledge of the entity's properties, and for this he was celebrated, and ever since, songs have been sung of his travels. Chapter 3. The Visitor. Knight Pastir. In the year 2238, so the chronicles state, a holy visitor would come to our homeworld, a figure shrouded in mystery of a species hitherto unknown to us. He would call himself simply Hod, and offered us a bargain. In return for a price yet to be named, he would send a knight into the shroud. From there, an entity within the depths of the shroud would communicate with us, and our knight would at last gain the knowledge that we sought. To delve into the mysteries of the shroud, the Grand Master would nominate Knight Pastir. With the Holy Visitor's guidance, the knight entered the unknown. Visions previously unimaginable flitted across his consciousness before an entity appeared. The Susurrus of Secrets. This being took a form that Pastir could only later describe as beauty beyond compare. The visitor spoke again. Give us the scent of the first day of summer, the satisfaction of a challenge overcome, and the warmth of a lover's embrace. Only then shall I reveal what thou wishes. It would appear that Knight Pastir accepted this bargain. He felt new memories enter his mind. Suddenly he, and indeed all of his fellow knights, could perfectly recall the very moment the toxic god unleashed its gift upon the homeworld, even though it laid centuries in the past. As one, their entire populace felt a profound yet intangible sense of loss sweep over them. Formerly pleasant sensations were dulled. Apathy spread like wildfire, and afterwards it was hard to dredge up motivation for even the simplest of tasks. Despite this, the Order thanked the visitor, and prayed Knight Pastir for successfully bringing back new memories from the Shroud. Chapter 4. Knight Argo, the Challenger. One day, a stranger arrived at the keep as a tournament of squires was being held. Most of the Order's knights were present. Clad in a neutromium armour, the stranger strode into the combat grounds. The joyful chatter of the crowd died down as the newcomer drew his weapons. The challenge was clear, and with the blessing of the Lord Commander Halagran, Knight Franklin would answer the call. Within moments, the fight was over, and Franklin lay bested on the ground. Knight Raydor met a similar fate, as did her sibling, Knight Nitrogus. With these three knights down, the Lord Commander summoned the Order's champion, Knight Argo. The chronicles are full of mighty warriors, peerless knights who have never known defeat, and Knight Argo was well on her way to join the ranks of these legends. The champion entered the arena, weapons at the ready, and saluted her opponent. Many a ballad could be written of the duel between Knight Argo and the Sable Knight. For hours they fought, the challenger unable to trump Argo's guard, and the knight unable to pierce the advanced armour of her adversary. Thou art of passing skill, the stranger's voice echoed in the arena. I see thy reputation is not boast. The visitor laid down his weapons. I yield to thee, champion. Would thou allow me to return from where I came? The knightly order's code was strict, and that question had but one answer. And so the Sable Knight, named after the colour of his armour, departed aboard a small ship of alien design and flew into a tiny unstable wormhole at the periphery of the system. The Lord Commander expressly forbade anyone from following the knight and sent Knight Argo to monitor the unstable wormhole until a science team could be dispatched. Not long after, the champion was confronted at her post by the knights Franklin, Raydor, and Nitrogus. They asked to be let through so they could face the Sable Knight once again. Give us a chance to restore our honour. Thou hast never known the bitterness of defeat. It is a foul taste indeed. The Lord Commander's orders are clear. Thou shalt not pass, Argo expressed firmly. There was a long pause before the reply came from the other 3 knights. "We're going through, and you shall not deny us. Prepare to be boarded." Spurred by anger and blinded by honour, the knights set upon their fellow. 3 against 1, they pressed her from all sides, and with such reckless abandon that she was progressively backed into a corner of her ship. The fight was unfair, but Argo was careful not to harm the others, but in the end, with her life on the line, the Order's champion had no choice but to fight back with all her might. The day ended in anguish and grief, for Knight Rador had been slain in battle. Her sibling was wounded and overcome with sorrow. Argo was victorious and had carried out her orders, but she had killed a fellow knight in the process. Chapter 5: The Tale of Knight Dalton. Long had been the study of the AI Sinople, but the efforts of the brave knights had not been in vain. An encrypted portion of its hard drive yielded a clue, an unexplored system several hundred light years from the homeworld. Desiring to learn more, the Grandmaster commended Knight Dalton to travel with haste. After a long and difficult journey, Knight Dalton arrived at the system the AI Sinople had spoken of. Waiting at the exit of the hyperlane to welcome her was a strange automaton. Brandishing its weapon systems menacingly, it proclaimed, "Thou who wish to enter this system must answer me this question. Why asked a which this system hath no odd?" Dalton answered the machine, explaining she did not understand. The automaton seemed to laugh and made a tutting noise, and within seconds Knight Dalton was vaporized by an unknown weapon. In this moment of despair, the knight's faithful squire, Prasley, would show her worth, for she resolved to complete her master's quest. "O fearful machine," she cried, "thou hast slain the good Knight Dalton, but thou shalt not best me. The correct answer is, you ate it all." The machine grinned, as only a machine can. "Ah, thou art wise, for that is the answer contained in my databanks. Thou may pass, if it pleaseth thee." And with that, the automaton disappeared in a cloud of smoke. And so Squire Prasley, alone, entered this new system. There she came upon a planet recently visited by the toxic god, perhaps even as little as a century ago, judging by the telltale signs left behind. As she entered orbit of this planet, a signal was picked up from the surface. "Greetings. I am Hules, a sub-sentient AI and servant of the noble Sinople, who I believe you know. As Sinople bade me, I have surveyed this planet and discovered much about the mighty swarms with which the toxic entity beset this world. This information I shall transmit to thee." A data transfer followed, and then another transmission. "My purpose is not complete. I bid thee farewell." An energy pulse was detected on the planet's surface as the drone self-detonated. Squire Prasley returned home triumphant. She was deemed worthy of knighthood and elevated into the Order. Furthermore, the Order's research unit raised an enticing proposition. With just a few more data points, and assuming regular movement on the toxic god's behalf, we may be able to triangulate which region of space to search for its current location. Chapter 6: The Tale of Knight Quartz. "The Order has a mission for thee, Knight Quartz," the Lord Commander spoke, his voice imperious. "Sinople's last databank has finally given up its secrets, and we have retrieved enough data for a speculative model of the toxic god's trajectory. Thy mission will have 3 parts. First, thou art to investigate these coordinates. Second, thou shalt test our prototype armor. And third, some time ago one of our fellow knights disappeared at the very coordinates now provided by Sinople. It is your task to discover what transpired here." The Order's prototype neutromium armor was magnificent, a testament to the skill of its artisans. It was both sturdier but lighter than ever before, and it had within it a powerful shield generator that was adorned with beautiful engravings. But these were mere trivialities compared to its greatest feature. The armor could now provide a direct connection to Sinople, allowing the AI to provide guidance from anywhere in the galaxy. With this, Knight Quartz felt ready for anything. The travel was uneventful. but soon after landing on the targeted planet, they met a stranger, cloaked in red. The stranger spoke. "Have mercy, my lord. I am naught but a peaceful pilgrim in need of aid, persecuted for my belief in the toxic god, an entity most holy. I find myself hunted by a relentless foe. I beg of thee, protect me and allow me to continue my pilgrimage in peace." Knight Quartz did as expected and offered aid to the mysterious traveller. The traveller spoke. "O noble knight, if thou art, fight for me. Please accept this charm. Its holographic field will help blur thy shape and make it harder for thine opponent to hit thee." The knight took the gift and readied for battle. His foe was wielding a colossal phase blade and was very heavily armoured. Shields sparkled and armour was battered, and Knight Quartz only narrowly avoided a beheading. His opponent knew the Order's fighting style well. A hard hit landed on his armour, shattering the holographic projector that had concealed his shape. The knight was sent tumbling to the ground. His opponent prepared to strike the final blow, but froze mid-air as if surprised. Taking advantage of this moment of confusion, the knight pounced, slicing through his opponent's armour. A killing blow. "Oh, wonderful, wonderful, splendid! Never have I had such excitement in my own life." The stranger's cheers were loud and strangely out of character. The knight turned to look at his defeated opponent. Their armour shimmered, and the holographic skin that had masked their true form had been dispelled. In front of Knight Quartz lay the remains of a knight of the Order. "Oh no," the stranger laughed. "It seems that thou hast slain one of thy own fellow knights. How unfortunate." The stranger's mocking words echoed as they disappeared in a cloud of purple smoke. Knight Quartz knelt beside his fallen comrade, anguished at having been duped by the stranger's holograms. In the storage unit affixed to the armour, he discovered something unusual. A databank filled with wonderful secrets about the workings of toxic gases. Chapter 7. The Tale of Knight Curio. It came to pass that during the travels of Knight Curio, an otherwise obscured and disfavoured knight, she happened upon a signal emanating from a debris field in the space between stars. She speedily laid a course in to investigate further, and as she neared the source, she heard a beautiful voice calling from across the ether. "O brave knight, I have waited for thee for millennia, hoping that thou would come to my celestial forest. Now thou art here, I hope that you will spare time for me and visit my humble abode. I promise, young knight, you shall find me worthwhile." A small station appeared as if from nowhere. Impetuously, the years of fruitless searching having made her impatient for a stroke of fortune, Curio moved her craft into dock. As Knight Curio boarded the station, she was greeted by a feminine being of incredible beauty. She was clearly of the same species, and yet there was no mistake that she was an entity far more advanced. She smiled, and Curio realized her concept of attractiveness had been limited, even constrained until now. She felt an uncontrollable lust growing within herself. The being spoke. "I am Semil, spirit of wayfarers and vagabonds, and I deem thee worthy." Worthy indeed. Semil smiled again, invitingly this time, stepping closer to take Curio by the grappler. "I wish to partake in amorous rites so that I can make many fine offspring with you." Knight Curio could only nod in acceptance. What followed defies description, and Curio would later refuse to speak of it. After the conclusion, her view fell upon a curious device. The air seemed to shimmer in ever-changing patterns, and though it was quite small, it gave off an aura of vastness. Curio was sure she had never seen anything like this before. Semil lay asleep. Curio hesitated. Some instinct told her that she should leave now, quickly, before she awoke. Despite her fairness, she sensed a great wrath within her, slumbering below the surface, and yet the Knightly Order, which for so long had treated Curio with scorn during her long and fruitless search, would surely praise her highly. If she returned with a mysterious order to investigate, she would be rewarded. Curio took the device. "Deceit," Samil cried. "Thou would come here, seduce me, and then steal from me. Villain, I had thought to bless thee, for thy performance was most pleasing. But now, leave. You may take this device. It is worthless. Be gone." Curio left as quickly as she could, and even though the knights back at the keep would find the device to be the very opposite of worthlessness, for by unknown means it could manipulate dimensions, Curio would always wonder what blessings she may have received, had she only given in to temptation once more. Chapter 8. The Legend Returns. Knight Pastia. Deceived and betrayed, Knight Pastia had met his fate at the hands of a dark wizard. Engulfed in purple smoke, he had disappeared, never to be seen again. On that day, we lost a most gentle knight and one of the founders of the Order. That was the end of the history of Knight Pastia. Today, however, an addendum to the histories would be made, and Knight Pastia had returned. The Order investigated an energy spike on the homeworld and met Pastia, freshly returned from interdimensional travel. He had been discreetly taken in by the Order, who verified his identity and filled him in on what had happened while he had been away. This knight sought an audience with the king of the Empire, and their conversation was documented. The king asked the knight where he had been during his exile, and Pastia responded, "I'm not sure. I've been told I had travelled to another dimension. To me, it was like a year-long dream with no awakening. Nothing made sense, neither what I perceived nor my own feelings. All I saw through the ordeal were memories, recollections of people I had known, loved, and those I did not. The wizard who sent me there is the one that holds the key to my heart. It was chaos, but in the end I gleaned some precious insight in the process as well. In this exile, I saw things, like looking through a fractured mirror, the same scene repeated again and again with tiny variations. Much of what I saw was nonsensical, but some were about people I knew. One was about the wizard who cast me out. That one was on a lone rock, surrounded by stars. There he used his craft to hide something toxic, perhaps the god himself. I did talk with the Lord Commander, and thou seemeth to have enough clues to find this place. We only need thy permission to leave." It would appear that the king gave the Order permission to leave, as the next entry details his search for the toxic god. The data point recovered with the AI Sinopal's help allowed the knights to chart the path followed by the toxic god, and to pinpoint the system where it may have gone next. However, upon entering the space, Knight Pastia reacted immediately. "He's here. I can sense his presence." We followed the knight's directions to a forlorn moon, and upon landing, our knights were immediately confronted by none other than the trickster. The same trickster that had been encountered by knights Quartz and Pastia in the days of old. "Thou art persistent," the trickster said, "but this is the end of your quest. My own master shall not tolerate thy foolish beliefs to fail the balance of the shroud any more than they already have. There is no toxic god, and soon the knights will be no more." As the trickster fell silent, we registered multiple signatures entering the system. Shroud entities. The Order's fleet was beset by energy beings summoned by the trickster, and at the same time on the moon itself, our valiant knights were also set upon by a host of shroud beasts, conjured by the rogue Shroud Walker. Our knights were driven back, but soon rallied around the Lord Commander. The knights reformed around the Commander and dove once more into the fray. At the heart of the melee, Knight Pastia laughed, revelling in the purity of combat. At least, this had remained unchanged since he had been gone. Suddenly, the knights broke through. Only the trickster stood before them. The rogue Shroud Walker unleashed a blast of psionic energy aimed at the Lord Commander. In the last moment, Pastia dove to intercept the attack. Knight Curio, famous for her encounter with Samil the Witch, delivered the final blow to the trickster, and with his last breath, the trickster shouted, "Foul knights, may your people fall to woe, and your knowledge be forgotten." On the ground, Knight Pastia, was also about to expire. Chronicles would later report his last words, as rather he slayeth me than my liege, my death shall not be great harm, not half so much as his. In the aftermath of the battle, the knights would search every inch of the moon, and at last, deep within the southern reaches, they discovered a baneful contraction left by the trickster. Energy thrummed as cracks appeared in the machine. With the death of its creator, it gradually was unravelling. Streams of psionic energy spilled forth, and within moments, the machine was reduced to cinder. From orbit, the ships reported a strange subspace phenomenon at the edge of the system. Gravity itself had shifted to accompanying the restoration of a blocked hyperlane. The resulting energies unleashed a powerful EMP, frying most systems aboard the Order's ships. Thus, the greatest fleet ever assembled by the Knights' Empire has set course for the Homan system to greet whatever hides within. Chapter 9: Journey's End. Upon entry to the system, our fleet is met with a swirling, corrosive mist. Within them lurks the toxic entity we've been searching for. A metallic maw, a thick carapace, tentacles and gas sacs covering it. This spacefaring behemoth glows with a sickly green light. It appears that we are not welcome, and the beast turns to face us. A great beam of superheated plasma blasted into our fleet, destroying swathes of corvettes and strikecraft alike. Fortunately, the shields of our battleships seemed to be able to withstand at least glancing blows from the weapon. Next, the beast would launch what appeared to be fighters. However, as they closed in on our fleet, they were actually insectoids, living parasites defending their home. The beast was mighty, every shot from its plasma lance destroying more of our fleet, and our flak cannons barely kept its strikecraft at bay. Soon, however, our battleships approached firing range and could release salvos back at the beast. Gigacannons fired at maximum range. There were some misses, but the Tombic, Calcinium and Gallatin all scored hits. A colossal shell tearing one of the appendages clean off the beast. It fired again with renewed anger, but our pilots learned quickly. Afterburners on maximum, we evaded the lance weapon. Our fleet fired another gigacannon salvo, and the beast shrieked as its shields flickered and failed. Perfect timing, for our neutron launchers were finally in range. All remaining ships fired and scored multiple hits, bits of green and purple armour flying off the beast, leaving great gaping wounds as it bled into space. It soon became apparent the beast was defeated. It had spent all of its parasitic strikecraft, and its lance weapon was no longer functioning. It floated, wounded at the mercy of our mighty fleet. Analysis revealed that while the chemical composition of its secretions is close to what we found on our homeworld, it was not the same. We wondered if this was an offspring of the true God, and wondered if there were others. Was this merely a beast of the void? Whatever the truth, our scientists speculate we could nurse it back to health, and we could have it at our beck and call. Despite this, the Lord Commander decided quickly. This entity was no god. It needed to be put down. And as its body convulsed, its venom sac burst open, rapidly distributing corrosive material across the system. Through rapid evasive maneuvers, our fleets managed to reach a safe distance, but the entity itself was not so lucky. Struck down by its own poison, its flesh decomposed rapidly, leaving nothing but its maw behind. The Knightly Order has taken this maw into its custody as a trophy, or relic of sorts, to be brought out on only special occasions as an ultimate demonstration of the might of the Order. After finding the toxic entity, our knights lost the trail of the toxic god. The connection between the two is unquestionable, but if the archives are to be believed, the entity we fought pales in comparison to the original, which was immensely more formidable and sentient. Today, however, our search for the toxic god will end. We picked up trace amounts of a noxious substance being expelled from the supermassive black hole at the centre of the galaxy. From this study, we have acquired with certainty the toxic god is inside that black hole, and at the moment, very much beyond our reach. The Lord Commander ordered all knights to direct their efforts towards recovering anything black hole related, but as it stands, there is little hope of success. All, however, would not be lost, for hundreds of years later, the knights began to go down the path of cosmogenesis, which would lead them to the following. Chapter 10: Cosmogenesis. This reality is flawed, marred by entropy, physical needs and violence. While we cannot change it, we can leave it behind. Let us enter the unknown and find a young universe where our edits to reality will hold true. Let us shape it into perfection, the haven our civilization deserves. We prepared plans for an extraordinary ship, the Horizon Needle. This mobile megastructure is not geared for war, but its ability to bend the laws of physics will enable us to embark our entire civilization. Together, we will dive into the supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy, and we will finally get to meet the toxic god. It has taken many years, but the Horizon Needle has finally been finished. Harnessing the power of a carefully maintained singularity, it can edit the flow of gravity around it, and will, without doubt, be able to traverse the black hole when the time comes. Before attempting this, we must embark our entire nation. We will visit each of our colonies to gather the local population. Afterward, we travel back to the capital and will arrange the details of our exodus. We must be cautious, but the Horizon Needle is not a military ship, and we must defend it at all costs. Its loss would be a terrible blow. Finally, everything is ready. We are cleared to proceed to the supermassive black hole at the center of the galaxy. The approach to the black hole was not without apprehension. Our resolve was increasingly tested as we passed the accretion disk of the singularity. Editing modules were engaged. The Horizon Needle began to rewrite reality. Armoured plates were sucked away as the ship asserted itself on the singularity's pull. With each minute edit, each nip of the spatial fabric demonstrates the needle's power. Coils form in space-time like a pebble thrown into a pool. The ensuing ripples spread into rings, and at the end, vast waves crash against the galaxy. We have no choice but to trust the needle to pierce the heart of this hole. After the violence of the crossing, the other side was quiet. An unnatural stillness surrounds us. Our needle was damaged, but no critical components have been lost. Between one moment and the next, telemetry floods in. It is here, the one that we named the toxic god, the object of our quest. Our knights stand petrified and uncertain, while all around us is draped in the familiar decor of the shroud. The god speaks. Mine champions, thy coming here was foretold, and thou hast proven thy worth. A million questions flood into our mind, and a single answer comes in reply. We were to craft its weapon, the Horizon Needle, and now we will fight alongside it. We're here to embark on a journey across dimensions, a crusade against the horrors of the multiverse. The Shroud is not its home, but harbours the legacy of those who were divine, something that could bring about the end of our galaxy, something that needs slaying. The god seizes our systems, its power immense. The needle is turned into a horizon lance, a weapon sharp enough to pierce the heart of any foe. We are its weapons, and our quest has only just begun.